Michka.
Hello, Sophie. How's it going?
Very well. Very excited to have our conversation today.
Yeah, likewise. It's always good to chat with you. So yeah, let's see where it takes us today. Looking forward, Sophie.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for making the time. Michka, I've known you for 20 years now. We were
Doesn't make us
studied.
much younger, but yeah,
It doesn't make it
it
any longer, but yes, maybe a little bit wiser, hopefully.
we'll
And
see.
age 21, you were a brilliant student. You were also starring in a short movie. You were the lead character. And then you were also an avid reader of philosophy, if I remember correctly, especially Nietzsche, right?
Yes, no, absolutely. Philosophy has always been like a big part of the journey. There's been a few names in there, but definitely Nietzsche was for sure one of them. Yeah,
Age 23, you became a semi-pro tennis player. And
it was the goal. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And stay
age
at it, kept at it. Yeah.
age 25, you became an amateur competitor in Muay Thai, but
Yes.
also in grappling, which seems
Yeah.
to be a very interesting discipline. I've read all about it.
So it's basically, yeah. So I used to compete in Thai boxing, which is like kickboxing plus elbows, knees, and clinch. So a super interesting fighting sport, which was in my view like the contact sport to get into. So extremely interesting. And free grappling is, yes, is it's Brazilian jiu-jitsu, wrestling, everything combined. So a little bit in the direction of free fighting, just without strikes or anything of that sort. So a big passion of mine for sure. Yeah, it was a great time in London.
In London. And today, at age 42, you're the leader of the risk consulting for West Switzerland at PwC, and
Correct.
also a director in business transformation in the same company. You're
Yes.
also an entrepreneur. You founded High Reality in 2017, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Yes. That's correct. Yeah. Quite a few years ago.
Leadership development trainer, executive coach. You're also currently undergoing a certification process to become a mountain guide.
Yeah. So that's always been like kind of part, as you listed it, right? So yes, I've been studying, in the past, going through like a master's degree in business, and then went over to do a career at PwC, but always kept, on the side like my semi-professional tennis career, then fighting at amateur level. And yes, I would say the last 15 years I've been focusing a lot on everything that revolves around mountains, a little bit back to my roots if you want, and also seeking a professional certification there. So it's the mountain guide certification, which is basically valid globally. So an interesting journey for me. It's really back to being a student,
Mm.
physically learning a lot of new things up to professional levels, but also cognitively, right? Knowing everything
Mm.
about weather, mountains, and all that. So big passion of mine.
And not last but not least, you're the father, very committed to a 2-year-old little girl.
Yes,
So
absolutely. It's probably the biggest learning curve and the most interesting challenge of of the whole that. It's like a mountain you can always quit, right? That being a father, no matter what happens, you're there. So it's very interesting learning.
for sure. And yet, so you're doing all of this, and yet your days are made of 24 hours like the rest of us. So I know because we teach time management together, I know that you know all the techniques and all the most modern, advanced, tools when it comes to time management. And yet, I want to ask you, what is your secret?
It's an interesting question because I really wasn't that type of person. If you look back maybe 20, 25 years ago, it's rather like monolithic, focusing on one thing and really doing that, like breaking the secret because we're in the same flat that we're sharing, right, in Oxford. So my focus was sports, right? I was studying was a hobby, right? And I was focusing on sport monolistically and managed still to get a degree, which was really good. But I've changed that quite a bit. And yes, so on paper, it does sound like quite a bit, and it is actually quite a bit. But I think the secret is it's a few ingredients, right? It's on the one hand is really aligning a lot with what I love and I believe in. So that's what gives me the energy. Because if I was to spend this energy and the time that I spent on all the projects, mountain guiding, High Reality is the company that I founded, PwC, my daughter, and the rest of it, right? If these things were not so meaningful to me, I wouldn't have the energy to do that in the medium and long run, right? So it's the fact that the things that I'm committing time and energy to, they give me so much back that I grow in the process rather than destroying myself in the
Mhm.
process. So there's a big alignment there, which is necessary. And but in addition to that, it's not enough, right? As we all know, quality is one thing, but quantity makes everything, right? You do too much. I love mountaineering. If I only do mountaineering 16 hours a day, I'm gonna hate it because it's just too much. So boundaries are also massively important to me. And so
Mhm.
I focus a lot on recovery every day, right? You wake up every day, you go to bed every day, and every day I have recovery practices to make sure that I can reset on a daily basis, ideally, and come back as refreshed as I can, kind of no matter what happens, the next day, basically. So that's something I'm very disciplined about. Yeah.
Mhm. And Mishka, you have a very interesting name. So your first name Mishka means little bear in Russian, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And your
And
last
also tiny
name,
mouse in the Czech Republic, I understand. So
aha,
a
that's
lot of cute
interesting.
animals.
A cute animal mixed with a warrior because guerrier in French means warrior. And
Yes.
knowing you now for a bit, I would say that the two definitely co-live in you. And I was wondering, how did that name shape, who you are today?
Um, yeah, it's interesting that you say that the two kind of coexist. So you said I'm quite an avid reader of philosophy, and one of the things that Nietzsche said is that basically generosity is also the privilege of the strong, right? And I think that's maybe a little bit where you're hinting at, and something that's been at the back of my mind for quite a while. So basically my key focus, I would say, in existence and life is growth, human growth, whether it's my growth or the growth of the people around me, right? And that gives me the strength to be, the teddy bear that I can be, with my daughter, or the caring friend. And it's very important for me to be generous with my time, so to say, whether it's with my family or the people I really do care for. And that's maybe the teddy bear aspect that you relate to. So I like to bring warmth, to the people that I love and that I like. And on the other hand, the warrior aspect. So it's quite interesting because having that name, it's you know it's like the chicken and the egg, right? So but somehow I think it did shape me, and maybe also shaped a little bit the spirit in my family. So I've been very much raised from a young age, like with these values, right? So it was
Uh-huh.
cold, but yes, it's okay to be cold. With my father, when we went skiing when I was 6 or 7, it might be like -17, like it's the first person who puts a hat on is the one who loses, kind of stuff. So it's kind of stupid challenges. uh, but yes, so that I think that attitude, the fighter's attitude, is has been tremendously important for me from a very very young age. It doesn't also mean being a warrior doesn't mean to be super serious and all that, but it means like embracing adversity
Mhm.
and seeking your own limits and trying to see where they are, and getting back, we said, to philosophy. So it's one of the other quotes that I quite like it. What Nietzsche said is, it's in adversity that you can really find out what your strengths and weapons are,
Mhm.
right? And I think that's true, right? There is no way to work upon your own resilience and capacity to rebound without actually putting yourself
Test.
regularly, daily,
Uh-huh.
through discomfort.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of been a program, that I've been following, I'd say,
Mm.
for quite a
And
few
I
decades now.
I understand that the warrior with its discipline is a great enabler for the teddy bear and for the
Yes,
bear actually to thrive, right?
in my view, yes,
Mm.
yes, totally. That's the two, feed from each other.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And but it's interesting. Well, I mean, we can talk about it a little bit later, but I think discipline is definitely an aspect, but I think a much stronger word is the cultivation of hunger, because discipline is
Uh-huh.
static, right?
Let's talk about the
Hunger,
mindset a little bit.
exactly.
Yes. What do you believe is a useful mindset for us to live our life in a purposeful, way where we can thrive and be the person we want to be?
So obviously, it's a super difficult question, right? It's a very also a very very broad topic, but you know, reflecting on the topic of mindset. Um, First of all, yes, this is a tremendously important topic, because you might have the best tools, the best knowledge, the best thing, the best apps, and whatever. If you don't have the right mindset, this won't support you and serve you,
Mm.
basically. So I would go even as far as saying, the most important thing is the mindset. And you might have the most wrong knowledge, and not all the data and everything, but it will get you there, because through your mindset, it will be your compass and guide you to the places that actually allow you to grow, right? And that's very much what this is, what the mindset is about. It's the compass showing you and leading you the way where you can keep on growing and seeking for things, challenges, but also knowledge that will help you grow.
Mm.
Saying that, so what is a mindset that will support? So you could go in the direction of saying, yeah, depends, everyone is different and so on. But I think there are some extremely important elements to consider there, and one of them is basically the sense of urgency. um, and I think this is also one of the greatest threats, right? So it's so easy to procrastinate on so many things, and basically most of the time we do that because in the back of our mind we have the belief, whether we know it or not, that, yeah, well, we'll have time at some point. I don't feel exactly the way I want to feel right now. I'm not maybe working on the thing that I want to work right now. I'm not maybe surrounded by the people I want to be surrounded right now, but someday it will get better and things will get sorted and all that. So it's very much a belief in the future, and we've been kind of raised that way, right? Most of our stories, they happen, on a long time frame, and things evolve and grow and get good, right? um,
Mm-hmm.
and what
Once
I've been
upon a time until they,
exactly
yeah.
exactly all the movies, all the books, everything, right? Long time frame. And one of the things that I've really learned the hard way in life is that things can, grow, and you can have a cut at when you're 22 or 23, and the story
Mm-hmm.
might stop there. And what you've been able to do within these years, whether it's 23, 30, 35, whatever, until life tells you, hey, now the show is done, your time on earth is finished. Well, all these years, this is what you will ever have as an opportunity to experience something, to do something, to exchange with someone, to read a book. And this is it, full
And you
stop,
speak
right?
from experience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So also, breaking the secret there. So when I was in the midst of, trying to be a professional tennis player, so I went to do like physical training on a regular basis. And when I was doing sit-ups, the blood, was staying a little bit in my head. So I looked a bit purple. So it was like, okay, that's a bit weird. And suddenly my left arm also started to get pretty swollen, right? So I was like, well, either I'm starting to become like a superhero and I'm about to transform into something completely new, or I should go see a doctor. So I went for option two. I went to see a doctor, and basically, after numerous examinations and after a few days actually of not having a clue what I had, I went through like a full body scan, and they found out I had a huge tumor, like a cancer tumor on my heart, basically the size of a rugby ball, that was pressing on my heart, lungs, and all that, which is why the blood could not flow through anymore. So from then on, I went into like very intensive therapies, and the whole of it. And that's where also I had like, especially after like 10 months of these therapies, I had another check with the doctors, and they came and say, hey, the good news is, the cancer is reacting actually quite well to the therapies, right? So it's really shrinking and the activity is reducing a lot. But the bad news is, well, the cancer is still active. And now we've kind of followed the protocol that we usually follow for these kind of cancers, which was everywhere in my body, like through my spine and everything. And like, so now, dear Mishka, what we're going to do, we're going to start experimenting.
Mm.
And for me, it was just like, what do you mean? Like, we're going to start to experiment with something that's everywhere in my body, which is like, I've lost a quarter of my weight already. It sounded like a death sentence. Like, absolutely. I was seeing the road, like for 1 or 2 years where you die step by step, basically. And this was a big realization for me that, yes, there's everything up until that point where you are alive and you can do things and experience and try things out. And this is it. This is what Mishka is, full stop. After that, you won't get a second shot. And I think that sense of urgency is so important as it pertains to our mindsets, the growth mindset, basically, because it's
Mm.
saying, hey, how long am I waiting to feel the way I actually want to feel, to start working on things I want to work upon, to experiment the things that I've been always curious about, to try to be as fit as actually I think I would like to be. So that is a huge element, rather than putting that away for the weekend, for the holidays, for when work gets less, and so on. So I think that, yeah, that sense of urgency is
How
critical.
do you help people create that sense of urgency, your coaches, your
Yes.
clients?
So it's interesting because I was chatting about that also with Greg Wooten, with one of the other tutors and coaches at High Realities.
So
He's a
Greg was
multiple, yeah,
before like a world champion in
yeah,
Muay Thai.
multiple world champion in Thai boxing, and an
Hmm.
absolute prodigy in his field, and a fantastic personality, by the way. And what he was saying is like, yes, but the way it sounds, Mishka, actually, even before your cancer, you were quite intense, right? So you are like doing everything for tennis, and you're trying to emerge being the next champion, despite the studies. And so, and like, actually, you have a really good point. So it sounds like that sense of urgency was, I would say, strengthened by my cancer and the experiences that I had, but actually it was something that was already there,
Mm.
very, very strongly. Probably, actually, to be honest, like in hindsight, the cancer made me a much more reasonable person. It kind of grounded me. So it's the unexpected, right? It's not something that tell me, hey, go follow all your dreams and all that. That's exactly what I used to do before my cancer, it maybe in a too intense fashion. The cancer told me, hey, actually, you know what? It's cool to have a conversation with your dad. That's really fantastic. And just having going to the restaurant, that's cool. So bringing me back down to earth. So it's more, actually, the cancer was maybe more sobering rather than an incentive for me.
Mm.
So where is the key? Why, even without the sense of urgency, can you have a mindset that's focused so much on growth? And this is where the cultivation of hunger and desire is a super important topic that we train and investigate in our seminars, but also with the coaches, right? It's about reflecting on the things that, no matter what we think or do, we actually love. The thing that give us a smile, that give us energy, and the will to do things, right? So, and
Mm.
it might be really different for any person, right? So, and the key, the key direction that we take in that regards is first reflecting on that. What are these things? What have these things been in our lives? How much are they present in our lives?
Mm.
Because that's one of the big threats, right? Quite often, like, don't ask me why right now, but we have a tendency, right, to be reasonable, to focus on the things that pay the bills, the activities that are financially rewardable and so on, or socially recognized. But
Mm.
what about the things that actually,
Expectations from others, right? Also.
yeah, yeah, exactly, It's cool to do compromises, right? So you're following your own little thing and all that. Well, actually, you should focus. You got your work and family and this and that. All the things which are really important. Yes, absolutely. But if you compromise everything that gives you like the biggest smile and the biggest energy for very reasonable reasons, the end might not be what you're looking for. We have a saying in our training which goes, for the body. If you look into physical resilience, an easy quote is, either you take care of the body or the body will take care of you. And that's an equation that's really hard to get out of. It's basically that's a very solid truth. But the thing is, and in a more abstract level, this is exactly the same with your soul. So either you take care of your soul, or eventually the soul will take care of you. And it means taking care of the things that you actually really, really like and enjoy, that give you a smile.
That's brilliant. Do you have a name for that mindset filled with urgency and hunger and desire?
Yes, so reflecting on that, right? So it's, well, in a nutshell, I talk about a mindset that's aligned with growth, because at the end of the day, I think when you talk about hunger and desire, what humans are looking for is growth and development, no matter what area. It can be physical growth. I mean, let's reflect. When do we feel happy? We feel happy when we learn something new, really cool, that we're like, wow, this is really, really nice. You can do something new, in whatever field, whether it's in coaching, professionally, or in the sport. You can do a new move and you're like, wow, this is really nice. We are addicted as humans. We are looking for growth. This is the principal kind of life. We are absolutely looking for growth. So you could call that a growth mindset, but you could
Mhm.
also call that provocatively, like a radical mindset. And why radical? Because in a lot of extent, it goes against a lot of things that we are pushed to do differently. So it requires a fairly radical attitude, which we also call the fighter's mindset. So if you look
Mhm.
at growth, if you look at resilience, right? It's not something that somebody, it's not something that you, Sophie, or my colleagues or my family is going to serve to me on a plate and say, hey, Mishka,
Mhm.
here's your growth equation, feel free to use it. It's not that, right? It's really like the mindset of being ready to actually fight for it, fight to discover what you want and need, and fight to make it happen. Not in a physical manner, but negotiate, put it out there, try, be brave enough, express what you want to go after, do it. That's where the radicality kind of comes in,
The
because yes,
boundaries you mentioned before,
yeah,
right? The
exactly,
saying no. The I'm thinking also maybe avoiding no some situations,
yeah,
some people, some.
100%. You know, I would say we have the tendency sometimes to think that if you go into like a mindset training or even a resilience training, it's about maybe something about looking at things a bit differently.
Mhm.
Like maybe trying to look at this at certain situations a bit differently, looking at certain confrontations a bit differently. But what really growth and resilience is truly about is not about thinking differently, it's about living a little bit differently, at least. Is doing things in a slightly different manner, is acting, right? So it's the thoughts that are systematically followed by action and changes in your daily life. That's what makes a difference, and that's also what's much, much harder.
Mhm. Do you have some practices? I'm wondering now. This is a daily practice, not something that needs to be constantly on your mind. I assume this is how you plan your days. I assume this is how you go to bed now. Do you have some uh, like routines, or do you have any kind of rituals that help you feed that mindset? Even if we understand that this is not going to be a universal recipe, we have understood that perfectly.
So it's a yeah, so let me use a quote again for that also. So yes, absolutely. Like Nietzsche also used to write that. He used to apply that for freedom. Say freedom is something that you have and that you don't have. that must always be acquired and reacquired, that you have to kind of fight for. This is exactly the same thing. It's all good and well, even to do training on these topics, on mindset, on resilience, on sustainable growth and all that. But at the end of the day, for all of us, we have to practice it and live that in our daily lives. And this is how we keep on growing and progressing. So yes, I mean, tons of practices in that regard. So one of the practices is systematically in my life looking for things that are going to challenge me on several levels. It might be a cognitive level, right? Learning a new skill, doing a new project, that I'm not very comfortable with, requiring new skills, whether professionally, like programming skills, something like that, or like kind of delivering new trainings. So pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone, also emotionally, right? There might be situations you don't want to go into, but like, yes, but that's kind of necessary, and let's go into that. I really want to see how I can swim in these waters, putting myself in very regular physical discomfort, right? Because that's also where it's in the discomfort that we that we really instigate our inner dialogue, that we can really work on our mindset. So that means like I'm not like a light build, I'm more than 80 kilos, but I will regularly go for runs and push myself in runs. I'm not the best runner, I'm never going to be like an elite runner. This is a fantastic tool for me, like to push myself to these boundaries, right? And see how I can actually handle the discomfort and still look for growth within that discomfort, become a little bit faster. So a lot of routines, like cognitively, emotionally, but also physically, where I'm testing my strengths and limits. Like, just to give you a concrete example, and that's why also I always combine that with the hunger, because hunger is also curiosity. So 2011, I went on a full year of sabbaticals. I was doing a mountaineering world tour, so to say. So I spent almost 5 months in Nepal on a lot of 6,000ers, went to South America, went to Asia, and a lot. Where was I actually? What was the topic again? Do you remember?
Like everything you did in 2011, Asia.
Yeah, no, that was there. Why did I want to? Yes, now I got it. So yeah, I was doing a mountaineering world tour, and when I came back, so I was quite mountain fit, but I certainly wasn't running fit at all. And again,
Uh-huh.
like I mentioned, I'm a fairly strong build, right? I'm about 80 kilo plus, quite muscular by nature, so to say, genetically. But I was reading a lot about all this ultra running, and the book Born to Run, and which is about the fact that humans are actually really made for super endurance, more endurance than horses, than wolves, and all that. And I'm like, okay, well, that's interesting, but I wonder, could that apply for me? And I was like, well, actually, if I want really to make myself fit for to be an aspiring mountain guy and all that, it will help me a lot to go into mountain running, so trail running. And I was like, okay, so I hadn't been running really for a year, so really out of training in that regard. And I said, well, let's have a look, curiosity. Am I able to, double the distances that I run competitively every 2 months? So 2 months after I returned to Europe and started my new position in Switzerland, I subscribed to a marathon, right? Which was already like a
Set the
big,
goal clear.
big distance, right? And that was like
Yeah.
step one. And 2 months after that marathon, I had the mountain marathon, which was basically 42 kilometers, but also with 2,500 meters elevation. 2 months later, double that, also in a race. And 2 months later, had like one of the most competitive, or the hardest race in trail running, which is La Diagonale des Fous, where you cross the
Mhm.
entire island of La Réunion. And there was exactly that, it was like the curiosity to see, hey, maybe I will break even that marathon one, right? Step one, but let's have a look, right? So I kind of try to embrace the challenge and found out in the process that this was feasible. So, and that's very much also what I think is super important when it pertains to mindset. It's keeping it playful, right? So you might fail and you might succeed. It's really about, okay, what are the things that are truly exciting to you, truly exciting to you,
In
Another
the
thing that
process
I
as
kind of,
well. Yeah.
sorry?
In the process, not just the end of the journey has to be exciting, right?
Yes.
But the
Yeah.
everything that leads you to that result.
Yes, exactly. Where you're in the midst of it, you're like, yes, this is actually really cool, but truly exciting. That is, you ask the question, how do we train that? So we also invite our trainees we challenge them, and we invite them also to link up with accountability groups where
Mm-hmm.
they get challenged on, okay, this goal that you're setting yourself, is that okay? Is that good? Or is that really exciting?
Uh-huh.
Because that's a big difference, right? That's also a huge reflection, because it's okay to settle for goals that are kind of luck one, so to say. But what about the things that again, you
Mm.
have one shot, right? So why not trying to shoot for that bigger goal, that most exciting journey? And that one was an example, right? It's lots of risks of failure, but it was a big question. I was like, well, I really wonder. And I put that in practice. It was really, really cool. I really wanted to be there, and like succeeding then at the biggest race at the end, which was like I ended up racing for 47 hours, no sleep. It was like, wow, this is where you feel alive. And that's also
Mm-hmm.
one of the things we really want to convey in the training, but not just convey theoretically, but really to create these experiences where we recreate that baseline for each of us, where we actually say, hey, wow, I really am feeling alive. Oof. That feeling that makes a big difference, and that's a baseline you have whether you want it or not, then, because then every time you have another experience, you compare it to it, you're like, yeah, so that
Mm.
was cool, but actually, yeah, there's a bit more to life. So I think that's also
So
super important.
in that process, if I understand correctly, there's a huge room for playfulness. There's also room for failure potentially, but there's no room for excuses because if we listen to what you described, you booked every step that was coming until the end, so that just withdrawing from the process was just not an option.
So that's also a super interesting concept, and something we use quite a lot. Was a big saying in the gym, in the boxing gym we used to train at, is the keeping it real, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
massively important. So that it's also a little bit that student mind, so to say. It's always putting yourself out there and trying it out, right? So you know maybe you have something that you have in the back of your mind, it's a big passion of you and so on, but well, okay, give it a shot, have a look how it feels, because maybe you won't like it. And that's really how the learning is done, and that's so important, because we all have like so many ideas and dreams and everything. And one of the big calls of everything that we do and that I believe in is, if you have an idea and some thoughts, it already exists, right? So it's cool, you have something really cool in your head, but it
Mm-hmm.
exists a little bit. So you start putting it out there, you know discussing it with someone, it exists a little bit more. Okay, you can be challenged on it, you have to articulate the idea, then you make a plan to make it happen. It exists a bit even more. So if I relate back to high realities, this is exactly how it happened. Like about 7 years ago, this was a chat over the phone. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much that we experience, like in the boxing gyms in the world outside of the corporate, where there's so much gold. And the chatting about it with Chris, with whom I created the company at first, and Greg Wooten, we're like, yes, these are the things that even if there was absolutely zero money in it, and the whole of it, like, we loved so much that we return to it all the time. These experiences, they shaped us in the sport, in the boxing sport, and in other environments, right? And there was a lot of gold in there, and we started chatting about it. And from the chat started the idea, well, actually, we could actually make a company out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's give it a shot. So then, we started pitching the idea in a few trainings at some large companies, and one of them said yes. And
Mm-hmm.
from then, we created a script for the first training, right? And then we had the first booking for the first training, and now we train about 1,000 people every year, with all these concepts across more than 40 countries. So 7 years from an idea that we had in the back of our mind, I was like, yeah, so a little bit of gold, and then the goal really happens, and the avalanche creates when you put it out there, you share it with people, and you make it happen, right? That's
Uh-huh.
the biggest element, and the keeping it real, right? Because maybe your
Mm-hmm.
idea is crap, And then, then it's time for another idea.
Uh-huh. So we understand clearly the benefits of putting this in motion, this mindset, and really as a way to fuel like um, get to this excitement, etc. Like, but what would be the consequences of not embracing that mindset?
So it's also something that we talk about a lot, whether it's in one-to-one coaching, also in seminars. And again, so if you look at the physical elements, right, of because we are basically like, if you look very simply, physical and a mental aspect. So on the physical side, if you, like we said, it's quite easy to see that if we don't take care of ourselves on a physical level, then the physical level the body will take care of us. But where it's much more difficult actually to realize the consequences, it's on the more abstract level of our heart, our ideas, our soul, basically. And so, one of the phenomenons that we've been seeing a lot, whether in exchanges or in coaching, is what I called, like the fading away, if you want. So it's the idea of you know having a lot of things maybe in your life that you might absolutely love, whether it's seeing friends, playing the piano, music, going to concerts, training Thai boxing, going outdoors, that kind of stuff. And step by step, little cuts by little cuts, doing less and less and less and less and less of this, because you have excellent reasons, right? You have the job, you have the family responsibilities, and I'm not saying that in a devaluating manner, right? It's just a thing that we have in our life, that I do have in my life. But basically, through the pressure of these responsibilities, cutting a lot of things away that do give us a smile, whether we want it or not, we feel joy when we engage in these activities. And the trick is, which is also why I also call it like death by 1,000 cuts. It's that famous Chinese torture, I believe it was a few thousand years ago, where basically, you do one cut, one cut, one cut. You don't feel so much, right? Until suddenly you progressively basically die. And that's the massive robbery about this strategy, is that because it's done in so little steps, you don't really realize what is happening to you, like all the corners that you're cutting, all the compromises that you're doing, until suddenly, like whether it's for some people it's 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the line, you might have the coolest projects on your table, you might have a cool house, a great family, and you're like, but somehow I don't know, I don't care, I've lost my drive, I'm not interested, it's I'm flat, and that's something that we see and investigate a lot. So these can be one of the consequences, right? So literally like going towards burn out or burn off, and basically having lost yourself, lost your compass in life. You don't know anymore in which direction you actually want to go, and there you lose the meaning, right? And this is where you realize that, well, resilience, right, is not about like resistance and being so strong and you resist. It's really not that. It's the cultivation of the things that do give you energy, that truly give you energy when you are defeated, when you are suffering, because we all suffer emotionally or physically at some point, or maybe even regularly. When you are beaten down, these are the things that will allow you to bounce back. And these have to be things that do give you the true energy, right? If this is fake, it won't get you there. And these things that do give you energy, you have to cultivate them. Nobody told you when you were born, because we, in one of the seminars a few years ago, when the person saying, well, already I have deadlines and I have work and I have my family and all that, so I have tons of pressure on my shoulders. Now you tell me, yeah, I need to take care of my body, I need to take care of my hobbies, I need to take care of my souls. Like, this is so much pressure, and what
Overwhelming.
about maybe the Buddhistic way of, maybe it's okay, we can embrace things and that, which is, I'm not saying anything about the Buddhistic way. That might have been a simplistic representation that the person had of the Buddhistic way. But at the end of the day, nobody got you to sign a contract where you're born this plan saying there will be no pressure, and everything will be easy. Yes, the reality is, yes, there is pressure and we have to take care of ourselves. And yes, it won't be easy
Mm-hmm.
because you need to explain that to the people around you. They might love you, but maybe they don't understand what you
Mm-hmm.
need and what you want. You need to explain that to your teams at work and so on and so on, right? Which is one of the reasons why there's a big danger to fail and cut these corners.
Mm-hmm. We also never signed a contract saying that we would deny everything that we want and are, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So,
And again, let's try, right? So we might fail in the process, but it's worth giving it a shot. And of course, we could, list a few more examples of how you can actually miss this opportunity in terms of mindset. So one of the topics we discussed, you and me, quite a bit was also the determination from the outside. So something that happened also was strengthened in my experience through COVID. With COVID and the studies around it, like showing that like we have more meetings. Even now we still have more meetings that we used to have before COVID. And basically it becomes that the new god in our lives is our calendar, right? So dictating when you wake up, when you eat, when you move, when you do whatever, right? And sometimes filling up without your own mastery or decisions, right? So that's also a big danger, right? Not being able to structure our days uh, as much as possible in adequacy with actually what we need and what we want. And again, not saying it's not a rigid mindset. It's not saying, hey, I am Mishka or I am Sophie, therefore all my days they have to be like this and like that. But it's like, okay, no. You know, but there is an equation, where I have to meet maybe my employer's demand, my family, and all that. But if I'm not part of that equation, then there's a big mistake in the game. So how can I
for sure.
negotiate to it's yes. It's not necessarily the no, 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 I don't want to do that. It's okay, yes, but can we do
Mm-hmm.
that one day later? Yes,
Or
but
yes, and,
yeah,
right? Yes, and we'll
exactly,
do it next week instead. Yeah.
exactly.
Yes. Yes, the saying no, the putting the boundaries is usually a process that we need to train consciously, right? Like and that happens to many leaders that start to forget themselves, and usually that even reflects negatively on their leadership appraisals, for example. So setting those healthy boundaries, knowing what we want. Is there anything else that you feel like we cultivating the hunger?
I think the hardest thing is especially like especially for people, because it sounds like the growth mindset is like the coolest thing you can have, right? And it is kind of the coolest thing you can have, but also it's a double-edged sword, right? Because my experience also working with like elite athletes and also key leading performers in the business world, um, is that the biggest challenge for a lot of these elite or super successful people, the biggest challenge is actually to act on their recovery. And I think this is also there is no growth without recovery, but that's the hardest part, right? Because that's the part where we have to make ourselves vulnerable. It's like, yes, but you know what, no, I'm not 100%. I'm going to be like 60 or 50 or 40%. I'm just like I'm chilling a bit, I'm not going to be the most fun person in the room, the most active person, it's I'm switching off, I'm letting go, and I'm allowing the recovery process to happen. I'm not like overtraining, overdoing, because that's
Which
exactly how you lose
uh-huh.
at the end, right?
Yes, but which doesn't necessarily imply, sitting on the sofa and watching Netflix, right? What do you have some recommendations on how to approach recovery?
A lot of them, but I would say, yes, there's definitely, you could say, there's the passive side and the active side, but the passive side is, again, especially for people who are looking a lot at growth, is so important in my view. And it's really learning to say, hey, you know what, after that certain time of the day, now is the time where I'm letting go. So,
Wind down.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm cutting my notification on the phone. I'm maybe not looking at my WhatsApp, my LinkedIn, certainly not looking even at titles of work emails. And, I'm not reachable by phone, especially for work colleagues or anything that can activate you again, right? I'm trying to filter out, right? So I'm allowing myself to really, you know, follow what my body is trying to get me into, which is recovery and progressively sleep, not interfering with that. So again,
Mm.
it means not being the coolest person in the room, not being the most responsive person on the emails at 10 p.m. at night, and saying, hey, from that time on, it goes down, and I'm, supporting my body process, who is doing everything to make me recover. So that part is crucially important, and the self honesty also to recognize on certain days that you might be super, super tired and destroyed. And maybe today is not the day where you have to push to your upper limits, because go for it. And then you're going to be off for one more week because you're going to be sick. Whether and I see that all the time with the strongest persons around me, right? The mistake that they do is that they do that one training session that they shouldn't have done. And then boom, 1 or 2 weeks, they can't
One
actually
too
train at
much.
all.
Uh-huh.
Exactly. So switching off, right? So really allowing ourselves enough time to recover. Super important. Sleep, a massively important pillar, obviously. And there's lots of tricks and tips, right? But as you said, there's also a distinction in recovery, which in my view is super important, is the distinction between recovering and indulging. Because that's really not
Mm-hmm.
the same, right? Because sometimes we were so tired, you're like, okay, so therefore, wow, chocolate cake and red wine, blah, 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 which sounds great, right? But you know how you feel the next day, right?
Yes.
Basically, you're trying to solve stress with stress. And,
Uh-huh.
a quote
Adding
from
stress to your
Buddha,
body.
right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Because I talked a bit like negatively about the Buddhistic approach before. Buddha is saying exactly that. You won't solve the problem with exactly the same attitude that got you to the
To the
problem, right?
problem. Yes.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
basically, when you're doing that and you are mentally and physically super stressed, and then you're putting a lot of chocolate and wine and this and that, and on your body, you're adding stress to stress.
Mm.
And yes, and then you watch Netflix in at the same time until 2 a.m. And I don't need to tell you how you're gonna feel the next morning. We all know that you feel crap. You are really not recovered, and that's the big difference, right? So recovery is really like, okay, I'm really tired because I've done a lot of things mentally, physically, and so on. What will be supportive of my recovery? And probably
Mm-hmm.
that's good food, enough food, but maybe not too much,
Mm-hmm.
right? Going to sleep, protecting my sleep, and then recover, right? And probably also watching out that I'm not watching like a very active movie on Netflix too late,
Mm-hmm.
because I know what happens then. My mind is flashing
Yeah.
the whole night, and I don't have deep sleep, right? And it's also not the message to be a monk. It's just saying, hey, it's mindset, right? And resilience is about living with intent.
Mm-hmm.
So taking the step back and saying, hey, what do I actually want? And trying
Yeah.
to act in adequation to it. So that's the passive side. But as you said, the active side also, which is often too neglected, is if you think about recovery, you basically want, very simplistically, ideally you want to recover your physical side and your mental side,
Mm-hmm.
right? And one of the great ways actually to push these two reset buttons is, for example, to engage in activities like we chatted about before, the thing that you really like, but
Mm-hmm.
activities that actually, whether you want it or not, that's the important point. Whether you want it or not, you're going to be fully immersed in the activity. For
Uh-huh.
example, think about theater, like a theater play. You're trying to tell a new text or something like that, or boxing, right? You will be, whether you have had a shitty email and conversation, you will be present because you
Yeah. For
have
me, it's
to.
singing. Yes.
Exactly, singing,
Uh-huh.
playing the guitar, a new
Yes.
instrument,
Yeah.
something like that, right? And that's fantastic, because these activities, they will cut your flow of thoughts, right? Your body will also be doing something, because when you sing, you
Uh-huh.
actually hit something physical, right? And you hit like the two reset button at the same time. So that strategy is, in times of intense stress, this is where you should do more things that are good for you rather than the contrary, right? And
Yes.
that's an example of it. Yeah.
Amazing, Mishka. Wow, that was a lot of good content that you went through. I also know that knowledge for you is so important. Do you see it as a way to also help us in that process of boosting this mindset?
Yeah, I think yeah, knowledge obviously is, I was talking about curiosity
Uh-huh.
before, right? And that's exactly that. It's that's part of the journey. You might set yourself some objectives that you think are super exciting, and as a part of that, it's
Mm.
always, if you want that,
This
a
growth,
kind of,
right?
exactly
Uh-huh.
at the middle of the triangle, if you want, there's growth,
Mm-hmm.
right? One of the corner is going to be researching, how
Mm.
do you get there, how do you become a better runner, how do you become a better programmer, how do you become a better leader. So you have to read the books, go through trainings, exchange with people who are very knowledgeable in this area. So that's the knowledge part, right? The
Mm.
second pillar of the triangle is implement. You
Yeah.
have the knowledge, then you put it in action, you see how it feels, then you refine. Maybe you need more knowledge, to fill a gap that you've noticed. So always like put in practice. There were studies done, saying that, sorry for the males who are listening to that, but like 93% of the males um, overrate their capacity to fight and fight back if something happened, right?
Uh-huh.
93%. That's exactly that, right? So it's good to have the knowledge, but until you've tried to actually throw a punch, you don't really know how much knowledge you actually do need.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So always like knowledge and then put that in action. And the third pillar of that is measure. So
Uh-huh.
how can you actually measure, whether you are going into the right direction is
Yeah.
massively important, right? It gives you like a good indication how
Yeah.
you're
There were
faring on the journey.
your successive rates now. Races, sorry, for example.
Yeah,
And the
totally.
performance at the end.
And you talked about recovery, right?
Uh-huh.
So one, you obviously nowadays you have the smart watches, lots of
The
devices
smart
that
rings,
exactly
yes.
smart rings,
Uh-huh.
a lot of things that can help you, and I think they're very
Yeah.
helpful to improve your sleep. What you measure, you can
Yeah,
then also
extremely.
improve, right?
Yes.
But also, having a practice that you do on a regular basis, maybe it can be running,
Mm-hmm.
like a track that you run very frequently, and that's a fantastic way also to measure how you are doing overall at the
Mm.
moment, right? Because if you see, for example, then week after week, the track that used to take you 45 minutes, now you did 55 minutes, an hour five, is like, okay, hey, Mishka, stop. Something is happening, right? So, it's always about having like an objective,
A
uh,
cursor, also a benchmark.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
which is objective, right? So
Mm-hmm.
time is an objective
Yes.
measurement. These sensors are objective measurements. It helps a lot, right? Because
Yeah.
as humans, right, it's our great strength. Cognitively, we are obviously quite talented, right? But that's also a double-edged sword. That also means,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why the mindset is so important, because you can basically, it's impossible to train or to teach a tiger not to be a tiger. A tiger is a tiger, and even a tiger born in captivity, you always have headlines, or at least on a yearly basis, of somebody who forgot that actually the tiger was in the den, and then he ate the zoo caretaker, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
tiger remains a tiger, but a human, and the history has shown that to us all the time. We are so gifted at overriding everything that we think, all our instincts, that we can
Mm-hmm.
also lose ourselves very easily. And that's why,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of mindset, having objective feedback,
Mm-hmm.
sensors, people, Sophie, friends
Yeah.
around you, like
Yes.
people that do give you the true feedback
Yeah.
is so
So
important, right?
essential. I
Yeah.
agree. Mishka, you talked so much about like self-growth. I'm wondering, what is Mishka's version, the 2023 version? How would you qualify?
Hmm. So Mishka 2023 has gone through a big learning curve, with
Uh-huh.
becoming a father,
Uh-huh.
also the last few years. And to be honest, also that's like you don't know how it's going to be right before you have a kid. And for me, like a big, we talked about curiosity, a big driver also, to have children is like, but how does life feel, with that
Mm-hmm.
amazing human experience, right? Which seems to be like so encompassing and so broad, so impactful, right? So
Uh-huh.
a
Uh-huh.
big driver of that. So that has been certainly a super big part of my journey over the last few years. So Mishka 2023, I would say is a Mishka who is like much more knowledgeable on a lot of things pertaining to the body, to the mind, the mindset, the emotions, also much more aware also of my own limitations, what are things that I
Mm-hmm.
can work upon. And that has been also a very big learning the last few years, right? So um, I, having done like, like semi-professional sport and mountaineering, which is quite risky, and fighting and all of that, I used to think, like emotional control I'm really good at. When
Mm-hmm.
things go the wrong way, I keep my cool, right? Until you're like sleep deprived for like a year and a half because your daughter is not sleeping, and then your emotions go like woo all the way, right? So I learned like, okay, well, back to student mind. Okay, how can I cultivate like more strengths in my
Uh-huh.
emotional balance, and regain that on a more regular basis. So I think, yeah, so the Mishka 2023 has learned that he's really not as strong as he was thinking in certain areas, and
Mm-hmm.
in some, like for example, like managing my emotions in the best manner. But also, um, Mishka 2023 has learned that he's got much more strengths in some areas that he thought.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking about the sleep deprivation, for example. It's something, like the Marines, right? The SEALs training, they are put through for a week, like with intense activities and very little sleep. It's something that you don't choose, kind of. It has to be,
Mm-hmm.
because it's so hard that you don't do it yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I learned in the process is that, well, actually, ideally, yes, sleep is fundamental pillar, but I can cope and function also with little sleep as long as I'm very disciplined in all the other areas. So
Uh-huh.
we said, like in challenges, this is where you realize what your strengths are, and this is where you realize, right, all the
Mm.
strategies to cultivate, resilience and positivity, physically and mentally. When you're deprived from sleep and so tired and still have, to deliver on a lot of aspects, yes, you can make it, and that's what realized for me, and I didn't know
So
before.
the
So I
great news is that it only gets, it only becomes easier from now on, unless you
yes,
go for
no, it
another
is
one.
it is
Yeah.
already much easier. It was a good learning from the first year, for
And
sure.
what is the next experiences, growth, learning experiences that you aim to pursue, having gained all that consciousness?
So the thing that I'm extremely in love with is, you know it's sharing all these experiences and bring the whole of that to as many people as possible. So training more people in this direction through trainings
Mm-hmm.
that do make an impact. So that's basically the next step for me, right? Focusing increasingly on these activities, and you know
And your
helping and
impact, right?
supporting further people on their growth. Sorry.
You're increasing your impact, right?
Yes, yeah,
Mm.
and that's something I really love, right? And supporting
Uh-huh.
like the growth of further people around me through training, seminars, and anything. So that's definitely what's the thing that will keep on growing from now on. And but again, like I would say more of the same, right? I want to stay curious. I'm still, working a lot on my climbing, trying to get to that next level on my running, trying to be, like a good father, a good partner, and there's still a lot to learn in that regard, right? So, these are all the things I want to keep on doing, and I'm working on a daily basis, right? But
Uh-huh.
yes, so yeah, focusing on human growth
Mm.
even more than I've been doing now, and having more impact, spreading the message, but more than the message, the experience with as many people as I can
Mm.
is a very important step for this year and the coming years.
I'm confident that you're gonna do that, just absolutely what you described. So thank you so much, Mishka. That was fantastic to have this conversation with you. And I just look forward to doing more great things together and having more great conversations together. So thank you again. Really
Thanks,
appreciate.
thanks a lot, Sophie. I
Thank
appreciate a lot
you.
your time, energy. Keep it up, and looking forward to continue the collaboration and the friendship.
Same here. Same here. So talk soon. Bye.
Bye bye.